Welcome to part 1 of what I hope will be a pretty long series, the Launchkey Mini for Beginners series. Today we're going to learn the basics of controlling instruments and drums, tweaking sounds, and creating loops with the built-in sequencer in the Launchkey Mini using Ableton Live Lite, which comes with the Launchkey. So since Ableton Live and the Launchkey go hand in hand, this is kind of like a double whammy as far as tutorials go. To view ad-free versions of this course and see new episodes early, you can become a channel member by clicking the join button below this video. And these courses do take a long time to plan, script, shoot, edit. So I want to thank DistroKid for sponsoring this first chapter and channel members for your ongoing support. Before we get started, unbox your Launchkey, follow the included instructions for registering your device and downloading the included software, especially Ableton Live Lite. Once you've got that all ready, let's get started. Alright, so with our Launchkey plugged in and Ableton Live Lite open, let's first double check Live's preferences, or settings as they're called on Mac. So under the Link, Tempo, and MIDI tab, we're going to find this control surface column and make sure that we find and select the Launchkey Mini Mark IV, which is the controller that we have right in front of us. And for the input and output, find your Launchkey Mini Mark IV and find the DAW selection. So DAW out and DAW in. And then go ahead and make sure your checkboxes match my checkboxes here with, for the Launchkey Mini, we've got track and remote checked in both sections. Now, to test that we've got everything up and working properly with our Launchkey, I'm going to find the Instruments tab over here in the library browser. And then under Drift, I'm going to open that folder with that little triangle right there. And in this list, I'm going to find a preset called Analog Piano. Then I'm going to click and drag that onto this first MIDI track. You see how it says MIDI right there? That's how I know it's a MIDI track. Drop that Analog Piano synth preset onto that MIDI track. And now if we play our Launchkey, we should have sound. Another way that I know our Launchkey is properly connected is because if I play notes and I look in the top right-hand corner of my screen, I can see a yellow light flashing, which indicates that Live is receiving a MIDI signal from the Launchkey. And I can also tell that this analog piano track now is armed and ready for recording because we've got this little red box at the bottom. More on that in a bit, but now back to the Launchkey. Play some notes and notice that we have the octave up and down buttons. Those are going to allow us to access higher and lower notes. And you'll be able to see the note range that your Launchkey is able to play right on the screen when you change octaves. Also, while playing a note, try to use the pitch touch strip and see what happens. We can hear the pitch change as we go up and down the touch strip, but it will go back to the correct pitch when we release. Then the modulation strip, modulation will affect our sound. Let's hear how it affects the sound here. Modulation is kind of a standard synth parameter that transforms your sound in some way. And finally, I just want to point out that if you play the keys softly, you'll get a soft sound. If you play the keys hard, you'll get a much louder sound. That is what's called velocity sensitivity. It can detect how hard or how soft you play the keys. And while we're here on this sound, let's use the encoders on the Launchkey Mini. Let's go ahead and try to turn this first encoder. Just go ahead and crank it. I can hear my sound totally transforming, and if you've loaded up the same analog piano sound that I did, you will have the same effect. But what I want you to notice is look on screen as you turn that encoder. And you should be seeing that first encoder on screen of the analog piano, the one that says filter cutoff. That is changing as you change the encoder on the Launchkey. And if we move down the list of encoders here, you will see that we have access to all 8 of those encoders on screen. These are called our macro knobs here in Ableton Live. So our encoders are controlling the macro knobs in Ableton Live. Having 8 macros is kind of standard for a lot of virtual instruments. Basically, each individual macro gives you a different way of changing the sound. For instance, that last macro is space. So if I grab my last encoder here, I can completely turn down the reverb on this sound, the space. Crank it up. hear that reverb come in over time. So even if you don't know what each one of these parameters means, play some sound, tweak the encoders, and see if you can just try to understand how they're affecting the sound. There's two things that allow us to control those macros on screen with the encoders on the Launchkey. One is having this actual device selected here in Ableton Live, which we already did. I can tell that this device is selected because there's a little blue hand, which indicates that we're ready to control this device with our MIDI controller. The other thing is having our encoders in the correct mode. Now, it just so happens that the first mode that we booted up in was the mode that we needed to be in to control things on screen like this, and that is called plugin encoder mode. And if you notice right above the pads where it says encoder mode, there's different labels on each one of these pads. We can change the encoder mode by holding Shift and pressing one of those respective pads. You can see that we already have plugin mode selected and that there are other modes available, but just hold that thought for now and stay in plugin mode. So with that said, I would encourage you to scroll through and find some other sounds that you might like, click and drag them onto that analog piano track, and do some playing. But what I want you to notice is that here in Live's browser, there's two little symbols. There's one that's a more open rectangle, and then there's one with a divider in the middle of the rectangle. The ones with the divider in the middle, if we drag one of those sounds on, we will have those 8 macros, like we mentioned earlier. Because this is an instrument comprised of a bunch of different devices that we have control over. But the more open rectangle icons indicate that this is just a kind of a pure synth. And these encoders will still have some effect, but it might not be immediately obvious to you what you're controlling on the screen. So if you want to have an immediate understanding about what you're doing with your encoders, try to stick to some presets that have that dividing line in the middle, indicating that they are an instrument rack in Ableton Live. Have fun, choose some sounds, play around, and the next step, we will talk about drums. And while you're taking a little time to explore, let me tell you about today's sponsor, DistroKid. And I've been using DistroKid since well before they ever sponsored the channel. I like their model of be prolific, which means you just pay once per year and you can release as much music as you want. It's a really easy process. I used it for my last release, but also they offer a lot of extras for their artists. Actually, my ambient album recently had an anniversary and I got a random email from DistroKid with a little graphic that I could use to promote the anniversary of that release. And they've got a feature called promo cards where you can generate one of these images for any of your releases. Also, Hyperfollow makes it really easy to make a single link that contains everything you want for your release, from all of the places people can listen to it, music videos you might want to add from YouTube, or if you got your music on Bandcamp, you can add a Bandcamp link to that page as well. It's really easy, really simple, and if you want to use my link in the description, you can save 7% off a DistroKid annual membership and start releasing your music. When you support the sponsor, you support the channel. All right, let's dig back in with the Launchkey. Okay, so now that we've loaded up a synth sound and had some fun there, let's load up a drum sound. First, we're going to go into Live and we're going to find the drums category in the library. And then in this list, there will be lots of different drum kits. Your list might look slightly different than mine, but I'm going to look for a very simple kit. I'm going to find this 606 core kit for now. And I'm hearing it preview, but I'm going to click and drag this in, but watch where I drag it into. I'm not going to drag it on that synth track like we did before. I'm instead going to drag it onto this second MIDI track. Drag and drop. Great. Now we can see at the bottom of this drum track that this light red box indicates that the drums are ready to be controlled. So let's try to control it with the keys on our instrument. The first thing I notice is my first couple keys control some sounds, but then the rest of the keys do nothing. That's because I need to set the keyboard to the correct octave, and luckily most drum kits are set up to be performed in the same note range. So we're going to turn our octave down if your octaves are not in the right place already, so that we're in the C1 to C3 range on our Launchkey. This will give us access to every drum in the drum kit across these white and black keys. Typical drum kit will have 16 sounds in it. So we've used the keys, but we've got these wonderful pads. How can we start finger drumming on those pads? We need to change the pad mode. Now, earlier we talked about switching encoder modes, but direct your attention now to the bottom of the pads where it says pad mode, and notice that we've got different labels here. The launch key does not load automatically in the drum mode, so we need to switch that by holding Shift and selecting the pad above the word drum. And now we're in drum mode. I want you to notice the order of these drums as it relates to the drum rack on your screen right now. We have the first 4 samples in that bottom row, and then just above those first 4 pads, we have the next row. So we work our way up that drum rack on screen, with the lowest sample being here, and the highest sample being up here. Now also, these keys are still going to work, even though we're in pad mode as well. This is all working using MIDI, meaning that no matter what, if I have this drum kit armed and I play a C1, the note C1, on a keyboard or on the pads, they're sending the same signal, so we get the same result. Now, we're on the drum kit, but how do we get back to that synth from before? The way we scan through tracks in Ableton Live with the launch key is by holding Shift and using these 2 arrows right here. You can see the words track above and below these 2 arrows. Track left is on top, track right is on the bottom. That's going to allow us to scan horizontally in our live set. So hold Shift and press the up and down arrows and watch what happens on your screen. We're scanning between the different tracks in our live set. So what I want you to do is scan to the left until we end up back on track 1, which is our synth. We'll know we got there in a couple different ways, but one being the little red arm button is now underneath the synth track. And now play the keys. Oh, I'm playing low notes again because we lowered the octave to play drum. So I'll bring the octave back up. And now we can play our synth. Let's go back to the drums just to practice that. Hold Shift and navigate to the right. We're back on the drums. Another important thing to note is I just changed the octave so I would be in the proper synth range. That means I'm not in the drum range on the keys anymore, but the pads remain in the correct drum range. Another quick note about the pads is just like the keys, they are velocity sensitive. So the softer I play, the softer the sound, while the harder I play, the louder the sound. But you probably want to start recording some beats instead of just making sound. So let's sequence some drums next. All right, to start sequencing drums, we need to change the pad mode again. So I'm gonna hold Shift and I'm gonna press the pad that says DAW under it to go into pad mode on the DAW, but that's not actually the mode we want. There's 2 modes hiding under this button, indicated by the 1/2 on the screen right now. So this is in clip mode now. If I press the button again, we'll be in sequencer pad mode, which is what we want. So now we're actually going to use both the keys and the pads. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the octave so that I'm in the C1 to C3 range and I can hear my drums. Make sure you have your drum track selected. And now on the keys, I want everybody to just press the kick drum, which should be this lowest note on your keyboard. Mine is labeled bass drum here in the drum rack. Bass drum and kick drum are kind of synonymous. After pressing that bass drum or kick drum, let's press the first pad and see what happens. Now the clock is running, we see the light moving across the sequence, and every time we land on that illuminated light, we hear the kick drum. So let's go ahead and program a couple more kick drums in there. Now we've got a 4 to the floor beat going. Program a couple more. So now we use the keys to select what drum sound we want to sequence here. So let's select another sound. There we go, this hi-hat sound for me. Select another sound. And you can get rid of a sound by just pressing it again. And pressing, like if we go back to the kick drum just by selecting it, we're going to see the kick drum pattern again. and we can edit it. Press play to stop this sequence for now. So we can select which drum we want to sequence by finding that drum sound on the keys here. When we do find the sound we want to sequence, we can just tap a pad and that will indicate us putting a note in and it'll illuminate. If we want to get rid of notes, we just tap them again so there's no illumination here. If you want to return to a drum and edit a drum, because if I press play now, I'm still hearing something, but there's no notes on the light pads, right? So I'm going to go ahead and press the kick drum so I can find the kick drum pattern again. Now, when we first did that, the sequence automatically started playing. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure we have something sequenced here because I deleted all the notes before. Press play so I can hear that playing back. And now we've got another sequence, but I want to take a look at Ableton Live's screen so that we can see what's actually happening in the software. So at the bottom of the screen here, we're still seeing our drum kit, but you might notice that something new appeared here on the screen. A new MIDI clip appeared on the drum track. This little rectangle is a MIDI clip. We probably want to see the notes in that MIDI clip, and there's a couple ways to do it. At the bottom of the screen, while we can see our drum kit still, we have the option to view the notes in that MIDI clip by clicking this window right here. Now, the bottom of our screen can serve both of those purposes. So if you ever want to go back and forth, if you want to see the drum kit again, you can go ahead and select this section right here. And we can always go back and forth between them. The other way, if you want to look at a specific MIDI clip, because we'll have a bunch of them pretty soon in the future, is just find the clip you want to look at and double click it. And now, if we raise this window up here so we can see the full thing, we will see our MIDI clip and we'll see the notes in it. Press the play button on your Launchkey, and we can see the line moving across. And we can see each of these individual notes in the clip. And if I want, I can double click in one of these squares and add more notes. Pretty much the same process we were doing on the Launchkey, but just manually. And actually, while I'm here on the Launchkey, I am actually looking at the hi-hat pattern on the Launchkey and programming on the screen, and you can see that the lights reflect exactly what's happening in the software. So if I make changes here, a change happens on screen, or if I make a change on screen, a change happens here on the Launchkey. It's a direct reflection of what we're making in the software. Because once again, the Launchkey is just a controller, and all the sounds and the patterns that we're hearing live in the software. Another cool thing we can do here is, even though we've sequenced all these sounds on the pads, we can actually record in real time now by pressing the record button, and you'll notice that light turns red. We're in record mode, but nothing's quite happening yet. We're still looping, but now any key I press will be recorded. So let's actually hit record again to get out of record mode. Find a drum that we like. I'll go with that one. Press record, and now let's play something. And you'll notice we have louder and softer notes. That velocity, that hard and soft playing, is getting recorded there as well. We're still in record mode, so any note that I hit is going to record. So let's get out of that for now. Now any note that I press, it's not going to record. But that's pretty cool. You can record in real time with this setup too. Let's use this same exact process, but with the synth from earlier. So I'm going to hold Shift and move over to our synth track, just like we learned before. Now we have the synth track selected. And what I would recommend, just making this window a little smaller again, so we can go back to the Instruments tab, I would recommend that we just get on the same page about what sound we're using again. Let's just select Analog Piano so that we can have the same experience. I've just clicked and dragged that onto our synth track like we have before. So now the synth track is armed. I want to play a pretty low note. So I'm going to choose that low note there, and we're going to sequence notes exactly the same way we did on the drums. I'm still in the sequence mode on the pads, that hasn't changed. I'm going to select what note I want to play, and then I'm going to put it here on the pads. And I might want to change that note. Getting rid of notes is just as easy. And also, I'll go up octaves for this. If I hold 2 notes and I press a step, both of those notes end up in the sequence. That goes for any combination of multiple notes on a single step. Once again, let's examine what happened in the software. You can see another MIDI clip has appeared now in our synth track. If I double click it like we did before and raise this window up, we can see the notes that were played. And if I press play again, we'll see those notes play through. A couple things to point out here. That in the DAW, if I select or if I click on the drum track now, it's going to change the focus of the Launchkey. So now I'm back to sequencing the drums. I'm on that same hi-hat page from before. But if I use the mouse and I click on the synth track, the focus is going to go back to the synth. I don't like that note. Let's do a different note. There we go. And by the way, even though we're looking at the MIDI clip now, remember I told you we could look back at the device by clicking down here in the right corner where it says analog piano. Now we can see our macros again, and don't forget that you can make adjustments to your sound here. You can see that this is going to be a lot of fun. All right, congrats on making it this far. Before we go any further, save this project as it is because we're going to pick up exactly where we left off in part 2. In the next part, we're going to talk all about clip launching on the Launchkey and also do some real-time recording and looping. But we'll pick up exactly where we left off with these 2 loops that we've already got going on the Launchkey Mini in part 2. Don't forget that channel members get early access to future episodes, as well as ad-free versions of this series. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.